With our summer reading packets, which we do, and as you were talking about with English, there's no real written attachment. We have that discussion group.
Right.
So, how do we assure ourselves that the less motivated student is actually going to read the book when they're not put into that position of requirement? I mean, do we need to go in another direction, or?
Well, several years ago, when I began here, we did have that as a component of the summer reading. And kids did come in at the end of their summer and, early fall, and they did have to write essays on their summer reading. And in many cases, what we learned from the essays was that students had not read. And so their essays were a jumble of Spark Notes and Cliff Notes all thrown together, and were mere summaries of what they had read or not read, and so it wasn't even beneficial then. So perhaps the perfect assignment has not yet been created for that. But I will say that my experience with the discussions on summer reading has been very positive. That students have fantastic things to say, and especially this year where they led the discussion in the groups, it was a fantastic opportunity for leadership as well. So.
Yeah, I found myself in the last 2 years, my groups were absolutely excellent. But then I've had colleagues tell me that they had the opposite experience, and that half of the group hadn't really read, and sometimes were making innuendo-type statements based on having seen a movie versus actually the substance of what they read. So I guess we still have a dilemma to contend with over that. Any other comment before we go to my next concern?
I also noticed with the AP psychology, they are I think they're required to read a book and do an essay over the summer, and I think that's great because, in college, preparing for that, a lot of stuff is done on your own. So I think that's a good way to help you be very independent and learn the criteria by yourself.
And become more self-motivated. Now, what about the other idea of these interim calendars? 60 days in school, 20 days off, or 45 days in school, 15 days off. There are experiments in many counties in other parts of the country, especially in the Midwest, where they're doing this. Do you think that's a viable thing for a national way of handling our concerns for education and the slide? Or do you think it's really a less functional process?
I think it's worth experimenting with in certain circumstances. I know that we have much of what gets debated about in school policy is done at a larger level, at a state level, not at a county level or a town level. Now the national level has become very involved. And because everybody has gone through school, everybody has an image of what school should be. And so I think that there's a lot of resistance to such a dramatic change. But as we look at the issues of the summer slide, and we look at other issues of our competition internationally and globally, I think that there is a push now to reevaluate the situation, to reevaluate what are we doing and are we best meeting the needs of our students to put them on an international playing field. And so I think it has merit. I think it has, I think it would be a good thing. But I'm not sure how much traction it's going to get with a lot of politicians and people who feel that our traditional situation is kind of hands-off. We're not allowed to touch the summer vacation.
Well, tradition is a very powerful thing, to say the least. What are your thoughts on this?
I also agree that it would be something worth trying. I think that we talk a lot about policy and then don't put things into action or experiment with them. And I think it would be worthy of experimentation. I think that the traditional summer vacation came about because of the different type of world that we lived in. The more agrarian society, the need to be out of school for a longer period of time in order to help the family harvest crops and things like that. We don't live in that same world today. So sort of changing things up a bit might be good.
Well, if we're going to constantly be speaking to young people about the needs and dynamics of 20th, first century skills, maybe we need to start looking at this. What do you think, Natalie?
I completely agree that breaking tradition is going to be a really hard thing to do because students are mentally set to have the summer off. and they know that, and every year they've had that. So I think if we did try this new calendar, it would take a while to, to go through the generations and to kind of flush out that idea of a summer vacation being, the full 2.5 months. Because, I mean, I know for me that, like, what I've read so far is that scores go down when it snows and scores go down when it's hot out. So it's like the two extremes that you're going to have to play with and, experiment with that.
John, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what everyone's saying. But, me personally, I would rather have like the summer off. I wouldn't want to be off in the winter because there's like not much to do. But to satisfy everybody's needs, to be fair, I guess, that'd be fine. Also, I think that with the 60 days in, 20 days off, we'd be, obviously we'd be in school more. So I think we should have, extend the calendar with that.
What about the idea of offering enrichment in mini courses during the summer that could count for credit? Not making up credit, but additional credit, like you do with colleges. What if high schools did that? Would that provide some cost efficiency, but also become an option where a student could be off, but also a student that wants to advance a little farther with their sciences or math or reading, they could do that?
I think so, but the problem with that would be getting students to want to agree to this, because I feel like most of the times when you have a program like that, like a summer enrichment program, the people who actually need it will not show up. So it's always going to be that people who need it the least that will be there, and that's going to be a problem as well.
Especially if it's only a virtue of student choice.
Yeah.
Students that will choose to be there in the summer, this is my contention, that they would be the same students that are in the AP classes and in the honors level. And I think maybe we would further the gap, perhaps.
Well, that certainly could be a risk we run.
I think the financial issue is also to be considered, because you already have pre-college programs that I think those students that are in those higher socioeconomic status levels, they're doing pre-college programs at Johns Hopkins. They're doing pre-college programs at Carnegie Mellon, and they're taking their summers and they are making the most out of their summers in a lot of respects. So you need to find a way to offer enrichment programs, but to do it equally, to give it some equity so that those students maybe that are motivated but don't have the means to pay for those programs can have access to.